Okay, here we are. Welcome to week 11. It's hard to believe that we're getting this far down into the semester, but yeah, we're that far down. We're at week 11. We got 4 weeks to go after this. So things are going to start accelerating here as we work our way to the end of the semester. We'll try to finish this strong. Alright, so this week what we're going to be talking about is citation, works cited, and your next assignment after the anti-bibliography, which is your proposal argument. Okay? Now, just as a reminder, when you're working on your anti-bibliography, your research question that you should be working with for your own version of the bibliography should be something that lends itself to a proposal argument. As to say, you are proposing a solution to a problem. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, and what's going to be expected of you for a proposal. But first off, let's just talk about citations and works cited. So, how do citations in MLA work? Okay? So, you will need a minimum of 6 research sources for your next essay, which is, again, the proposal. Okay? As such, you're going to need to be knowledgeable of how to cite the information you receive from those sources in your text. Now, there are a few ways that you can do this that fall under MLA formatting rules. Okay? There's a few ways that you can do this that all fall within proper formatting. So that's what we're going to look at today, is all of the ways that you can do this. Starting with in-text citation. So, the basic form of MLA citation involves a parenthetical citation at the end of a sentence, which includes the information that you're citing. Okay? That's the most basic way to do it. The rule is that whatever you put into your essay that you did not generate yourself, that is, say you needed research information to find that information, that has to be cited. Within the parentheses in a parenthetical citation is the author's name or a shortened title of the source if the author is not given, or if the author has written more than one work in your works cited. Okay? This may also include page numbers if the source is a print source. However, if it's not a print source, leave it at the name or title. Okay? Now, one rule you have to remember about citations is that when you're doing them this way is that they appear within the end punctuation of the sentence. So, for example, we have an example here where you just have the cited information, and then after that you have in parentheses the citation for the information. Then after that citation, after the closed parenthesis, you have a period. Now, the rules change if you're citing a quote, but they say the same. Okay? You're still going to keep the citation within the end punctuation. However, now it's going to go outside of the quotation mark. Again, this is the only time that putting punctuation outside of quotation marks is acceptable. Okay? If you're citing a quote, the closed quote mark goes in front of the citation, while the end punctuation goes after the citation. So, as you can see in this example. Okay, we have a cited information which is in quotes. Okay, so it is a quote from a source. You have the end quotation mark, and then you have the parenthetical citation. Then after the parenthetical citation is the period. Okay, that's the basic way of doing in-text citation. There are advanced ways of doing this. Okay, here's what you can look at. More artful writers are able to cite their sources without using the parenthetical citations. It's particularly easier in the era of more common internet sourcing, where you don't have to cite a page number. Okay? It's really easy to do it this way. So, including the source for the information within the text is better for the flow of the reader than the in-text parenthetical citation. So basically what you're doing here is you're using a signal phrase for the cited information as your citation. Okay? It's going to act in place of that parenthetical citation. So if you have that signal phrase, you don't need the parenthetical citation. Okay? So, for instance, author name explains that, and then put the cited information in your own words. Okay? That's perfectly acceptable in MLA format for a citation. Second one is for a quote. Cited information in quotes says author name. Okay? That tag, that signal tag, is going to be your citation. Okay? These are acceptable in MLA format. Now, there is a certain circumstance where you wind up using both. And that is if you're using a source that's quoted by someone else. Okay? If your source is quoted by someone else, you will need to include the source where you found the quote in a parenthetical citation. Okay? So, in this case, we have the quotation. Okay? Start with a quotation. Then asserts source name. Okay? So, the source name is in your tag. That's your signal tag. And then follow that up with your parenthetical citation. Quoted by, and then there's the citation for where you found that quote. Okay? The author of the original of the work that it was quoted in, and if it's a print source, the page number. Okay? This tends to go around in circles a little bit, but once you get started doing it, it kind of becomes second nature. So, to try to help you with this, I do have a citation exercise for you guys to do this week and post to the message board. Okay? So, in my chapter 7 of Yagelski, it is your chapter 26. If you're using the online version, it's chapter 26, section 4. Okay? There are 4 excerpts from 4 separate articles located in sections of the chapter covering introductions and telling an anecdote. Okay? The 4 titles, they all have titles to them too, which is convenient. Okay? So the 4 titles you're looking for are The Legalization of Prostitution, Mla More Than Ever, Sitting Comfort, The Impact of Different Chairs on Anxiety, and Sexualizing Conversation. Okay? And we're going to go through these excerpts in a minute here. Okay? Try to help it make it easier for you. So, you're going to choose one of these excerpts, read it briefly, and then write a simulated sentence citing the excerpt. Write the sentence in a way that uses a parenthetical citation, and then write it again as an integrated citation. Okay? Now, in order to help make this easier on you, the bibliographical information is supplied for each excerpt at the bottom of each excerpt. Okay? You'll have the author names, and if it's applicable, you'll have the page numbers where it came from. Although I will say most of them are from web sources. Okay? So I want you to take 10 minutes for this exercise to take a look at these excerpts and then try to create citations for them. But we're first, before we do that, we're going to actually take a look at the excerpts here so that you know what you're looking at. All right, so this is the full book copy that is in MindTap that I'm using to try to illustrate this for you. Okay? So, what we have here, getting right to the point. Okay? And here is the first one of these excerpts, the legalization of prostitution. As you can see here, we do have the source, and that's the bibliographical information that you need. Okay? So, legalization of prostitution. Here is the passage. Prostitution is the contractual barter of sex favors, usually sexual intercourse, for monetary considerations without any emotional attachment between the partners. Whenever this topic is mentioned, people usually shy away from it because they are thinking of the actions involved in this profession. The purpose of this paper, however, is not to talk about these services, but to discuss the social, economic, and legal issues behind prostitution. Okay? So, find something that you can pull from that, and then how you would put it into your own essay on the topic with the proper citation. That's what I want you to do here. So that's the first passage. Second passage is in 26-4B, focusing on context. This is Mla More Than Ever. Okay? Shaoshan is a small village found in a valley of the Hunan province, where a little over a century ago, Mao Zedong was born. The first thing heard in Shaoshan is the music, and the music is inescapable. Suspended from posts towering over Mao's childhood home are loudspeakers from which the same tune is emitted over and over, a hit of the Cultural Revolution titled We Love You, Mao. The Chinese people were faced with an incredibly difficult situation in 1976 following the death of Mao Zedong. What was China to do now that the man whom millions accepted as the leader of their country's rebirth to greatness had passed away? China was in mourning within moments of the announcement. Although Mao rarely had been seen in public during the 5 years preceding his death, he was nevertheless the only leader that China had known since the Communist armies swept triumphantly into Peking and proclaimed the People's Republic 27 years earlier. He was not only the originator of China's socialist revolution, but its guide, its teacher, and its prophet. Common sense foretold the impossibility of erasing communism and replacing Chairman Mao. He departed the world with his succession and China's future uncertain. With his death, historians and reporters around the world offered predictions of what was to become of China. They saw an instant end to Maoist theory. Through careful examination of Chinese life both under and after Mao, it is clear that the critics of 1976 were naive in their prophecies and that Mao Zedong still remains the central, dominant figure in Chinese political culture today. Alright, so that is the second excerpt. Here comes the third one. This is for this is for sitting comfort, the impact of different chairs on anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to have to go with the alt text here to try to read this because for some reason the graphic didn't load. Alright. So here's what this excerpt reads. Kutash and Northrop studied the comfort of family members in the ICU waiting room. They found that no matter the situation, waiting rooms are stressful for the patients and their families, and it is the nursing staff's job to comfort both. From this emotional distress, many family members judged the waiting room furniture as uncomfortable and only talked about it in a negative context. From this study, we have learned that there is a direct relationship between a person's emotional state and how that person perceives the physical state he or she is in, such as sitting in a chair. Is this relationship true in reverse as well? Can the way a person perceives his or her present physical state, such as sitting in a chair, affect his or her emotional state? This is the question that the present study sought to answer. Okay? So this is in section 26-4C using a reference point. Then here's the last one, 26-4D, telling an anecdote. We have another issue with the graphics here. It should work in yours, okay? But here is what this text should read, okay? So this is sexualizing conversation. I was addressing a small gathering in a suburban Virginia living room, a women's group that invited men to join them. Throughout the evening, one man had been particularly talkative, frequently offering ideas and anecdotes, while his wife sat silently beside him on the couch. Toward the end of the evening, I commented that women frequently complain that their husbands don't talk to them. This man quickly concurred. He gestured toward his wife and said, "She's the talker in our family." The room burst into laughter. The man looked puzzled and hurt. "It's true," he explained. "When I come home from work, I have nothing to say. If she didn't keep the conversation going, we'd spend the whole evening in silence." This episode crystallizes the irony that although American men tend to talk more than women in public situations, they often talk less at home. And this pattern is wreaking havoc with marriage. Okay. Alright, so that does it for these excerpts. What I want you to do is choose one of them and take about 10 minutes to create a passage from a hypothetical essay involving information you found in that passage, and then find the proper way to cite it using parenthetical citations and then using advanced citation methods. So use a parenthetical first and then use a signal phrase to cite it. Okay? I'll give you 10 minutes. Go ahead and do that. Alright, and we're back. Alright, so what we're going to be talking about now is works cited listings. Okay? We covered citations now first, so now we're going to take a look at an actual works cited page. Okay? A works cited page requires the following according to MLA. Okay? First off, the page must be separate from the last page of the accompanying essay. Okay? Additionally, for the proposal assignment and for all essay assignments I give, the works cited page does not count toward the essay's page count. Okay? When I say 3 to 5 pages, I mean 3 to 5 pages of essay, not including a works cited page. Okay? Second, listings must be in alphabetical order based on the first word in each listing. Okay? Whether this is an author's last name. Remember, when you submit human authors, the first author listed should be listed as last name, comma, first name. Okay? Or if you have a corporate author, or the author matches the publisher, or if there is no author listed and it's an anonymous author, then you start with the title of the article. Okay? So first word of the title, excluding articles such as a, an, or the. Okay? So any sort of language article that starts an essay or that starts a title does not count toward alphabetical order. I can't tell you how many people I've had to mark off on anti-bibs in the past because they had a litany of sources that started with the word the that were all put in the T section. And none of them had the second word of the title being any kind of word that started with T. Okay? At their base, each listing in the works cited page must include the title of the work, the publication, publishing company, or website which presented the work, and the date of the work's initial publication. So we need to know who wrote it, where it comes from, and when it comes from. That's what the basics are. So here's a basic general template for works cited listings. Okay. Now, first off, I want you to notice the spacing on this. Okay. This is the spacing that MLA wants used when you do a works cited page. Okay. For every listing, the first line should be flush with the left margin. And every subsequent line should be one tab space in. This is what's called a hanging indent. Okay? So, first thing is the author. In a basic general listing, you have the author's name. Okay? Then you have the title in quotation marks of the article. Okay? Title of container. Do not list container for standalone books such as novels. Okay? If you are citing like a standalone book and you're citing stuff from the entire book, don't worry about the article, the title. Just give me the title of the book, okay, in italics, okay? Out of italics include other contributors. This would be translators or editors, okay? Next, for periodicals, it should include a version, or this could also be for books that have multiple editions, okay? Then following that is for periodicals, give me a number, volume, and or issue number. Okay. Then you have then you include the publisher, the publication date. Okay. The location of the article. Okay. This would be pages within the container. If it has numbered paragraphs, then give me the paragraph numbers. Or you have a URL if it's a website, or a DOI number if it is an article from a database. Okay? Then you have the second container's title. I got a mistake here where that second container's title should also be in italics. Okay? Follow that with for the second container, other contributors, version, number, publisher, publication date, location. Okay? And then following that, if applicable for electronic sources, the date of access. Okay? This is especially important for web sources because websites are fluid, they can change. Okay? So that's the basic template that you will notice that MLA uses for just about everything. Okay? Now, it's going to have a lot of variations based on the certain media that you were citing, that you're including in the Works Cited page, but it's going to be approximately the same no matter what. Okay? So, now we're going to take a look at Purdue OWL's Works Cited guide. Okay, there is an extensive MLA guide in Purdue OWL with several guidelines for how to properly include virtually every possible form of media into an MLA Works Cited page. We have one page that covers Works Cited basics, but then you have the 4 pages that we're going to take a look at now, which divided up into books, periodicals, electronic sources, and other common sources. Okay? Now, these links are available at the PowerPoints and YouTube lectures link on eCampus under Week 9's lecture. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. This also includes the link to the MLA guides for in-text citation. Okay? So if you're unclear about those citation rules we just went over not too long ago here, that's the place you want to go to get clarification. Okay? But for now, we're going to take a quick glance through these 4 websites these 4 web pages at Purdue OWL, so that you can see how to do Works Cited in these particular formats. Okay? So let's take a look. Alright, so here is the first of the OWL pages. This is the page on books. Okay? When you're gathering book sources, make sure to make note of the following bibliographic items: the author names, other contributors such as translators or editors, the book's title, editions of the book, the publication date, the publisher, and the pagination. Okay? Alright, so the first part of this is basically talking about changes, okay, that have been made between editions of the MLA Style Guide. So one of them is that they used to ask you for the medium of the work that you were including, such as if it's a website or a book or a periodical article or whatever. Okay, you do not have to do that. Okay. Also, they're showing that DOIs should be used instead of URLs when available. This is primarily for articles from databases. Okay? Here's the general format that I showed you before. And now let's take a look at the basic the formats here for books. Okay? So here is book with one author. These are fairly simple. If you're citing the whole book, this is what you want to do. Okay? More than one author. If you have 2 authors, order the authors in the same way they're presented in the book. Start by listing the first name that appears on the book in last name, first name format. Subsequent author names appear in normal order. First name, last name format. Okay? So as we have here, Gillespie, Paula, and Neil Lerner. Okay? For this one book. If there are 3 or more authors, list only the first author, followed by the phrase et al., which is Latin for and others, in place of the subsequent authors' names. Note that there is a period after al and et al. Also note that there is never a period after the et in et al. Okay? That's because this is not an abbreviation. These are 2 entire Latin words. Okay? So, to do 3 or more authors, Wysocki, Anne Francis, et al. Okay? If you are listing 2 or more works by the same author, list them alphabetically by title. Again, remember to ignore articles like a, an, and the. Provide the author's name in last name, first name format for the first entry only. Then for each subsequent entry by the same author, use 3 hyphens and a period to show that that is the same author as previous. Okay? If it's a book by a corporate author or organization, it may include list the names of corporate authors in the place where an author's name typically appears at the beginning of the entry. Now, here's the thing that people do all the time. Okay? For example, you look at the example they have here, American Allergy Association, Allergies in Children. if it's a corporate author, you cannot treat its name like a human author. Okay? So, too many times, even after I give this instruction, I still have people turning in papers where they have, for instance, this particular listing, only the author is listed as Association, American Allergy. Okay, that is not how this works. Okay? If it's a corporate author, you need to list that corporate author the way their name is listed because it's not a human being. Okay? Organizations do not have surnames. Okay? So, American Allergy Association, straight up. Exception to this is when the author and publisher are the same. Okay? Skip the author and list the title first, then list the corporate author only as the publisher. Okay? So we have the title of the book instead of the author because the author is the same as the publisher, Aspen Law and Business. Okay? If you have a book with no author listed by the title. Okay? For instance, we have the Encyclopedia of Indiana. Okay? So, if you have a translated book, it's your option whether you cite it by the author's name or by the translator's name, whichever is more important to the essay that you're writing. If it's more important that we know who the translator is, then list it by the translator. And then afterwards say by the author. Okay? If the content of the work is more important than who translated it, then start with the author's name, give the title, and then say translated by, and give the translator's name. Alright. If it is a republished book, okay, give the original publication date and then the current publication information. So that's its current publisher and then the date that the reprint was, the republication was made. Okay? If it is a edition of a book, include which edition it is. Okay, as you can see here. If it's a work prepared by an editor, list the editor where you would list a translator before. Okay. Then we have anthology or collection. Typically, you're not citing the whole thing. You're only citing an individual work in it. But if you decide that you need to cite the whole thing, you place the editors in place of the author. Okay. A work in an anthology, reference, or collection is going to be cited kind of like you would do a periodical. Okay. Give the author's name, the title of the essay, and then the title of the collection, followed by the editor. Okay. And then the publisher, the year, and then the page range where that particular essay is published. Okay? Now, if you cite more than one essay from the same edited collection, MLA indicates you may cross-reference within your works cited list in order to avoid writing out the publishing information for each separate essay. You should consider this option if you have several references from a single text. Okay, to do so, include a separate entry for the entire collection listed by the editor's name as below. Okay, so you start off with the listing for the entire collection. Then for each individual essay from the collection, list the author's name in last name, first name format, title of the essay, and then the editor's last name and the page range. So that we know that these articles came from that particular collection. When cross-referencing items in the works cited list, the alphabetical order should be maintained for the entire list. Okay? So, going on to some stuff that you may not be necessarily using. Poems or short stories. Okay? Literary works. Article and reference books such as encyclopedias or dictionaries. They typically start with the title of the article because they usually don't give author credit. If it's a multi-volume work, you can cite the entire work, or you can cite however many volumes that you're citing. Okay. However, if you are doing a multi-volume work and the volume that you're using has its own title, just use the title of the one volume. Okay. Then we have for citing an introduction, preface, foreword, or afterword. And then here's an interesting one. The book published before 1900. The main change here is going to be the publication information. Okay? In books published before 1900, the more important thing is where it was published rather than by whom. Okay? So, whereas you'd have a public publishing company and then a date for a book in the 20th century and beyond. For pre-1900 literature, if you're using an original copy, for the publication information include the city of publication. So in the example here, Excursions by Henry David Thoreau, instead of citing a publishing company for that book, you're just citing Boston, which is where it was published. And then the date that the book was published was 1863. Okay? When you're including the Bible in a Works Cited, you're going to need to cite which edition of the Bible that you are using. Okay? Because there are substantive differences between translations of the Holy Bible. Okay? So we know if it's we have 3 different versions here. King James Version, New Oxford Annotated Version, New Jerusalem Bible. Okay? We need to know the particulars of which version you're using. If you're using a government publication, okay, cite the author of the publication if the author is identified. Otherwise, start with the name of the national government followed by the agency, including any subdivisions or agencies that serves as the organizational author. Okay, that's what we have in these 2 examples. So we have United States Congress Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Then we have United States Government Accountability Office. Okay. Generally speaking, for government publications, the publisher is Government Printing Office. Okay. For congressional documents, be sure to include the number of the Congress and the session when the hearing was held or resolution passed, as well as the report number. Okay. So, as you can see here for the Senate Committee, 110th Congress, first session. Okay. Then we have for pamphlets, they don't differ too much from works where the publisher and the author are the same. Dissertations and master's theses, you need to note that it is a dissertation or a thesis. Okay, cite the college, the university that it was submitted to. Including, and then you have the author, the title of the thesis, and then the date that the thesis was submitted. Okay, that does it for books. Next up is periodicals. Alright, so here is the periodicals page. Periodicals include magazines, newspapers, and scholarly journals. Works cited entries for periodical sources include 3 main elements. First, the author of the article, the title of the article, and then the information about the magazine, newspaper, or journal. Now, MLA uses the generic term container to refer to any print or digital venue, a website or print journal, for example, in which an essay or article may be included. Okay? So when you hear them talking about containers, that's what they're talking about. So let's start with the basics here. An article in a magazine. Start with the author's name, then the title of the article. Title of periodical in italics, the date, the publication date for the periodical, and then the page range for that article. Same with newspapers. Okay, the only difference here is going to be the page, because usually stuff will be contained to a single page, and usually the page numbers will have something to identify what section of the newspaper they come from. Also, if it's a major national newspaper, just give the title of the paper. If it is a lesser known or local publication, include the city name in brackets after the title of the newspaper. So, for instance, Post and Courier, Charleston, South Carolina, Purdue Exponent, West Lafayette, Indiana. Okay? And we have for a review. Okay? If you're doing if you're citing a review that's published in a periodical, okay, if the review has a title, include that. Otherwise, just say review of, and then say what they're reviewing. Okay. An editorial or a letter to the editor. Okay. Cite as you would any article in a periodical, but include the designator's editorial or letter to identify the type of work it is. Okay. So, for instance, this is going to be an editorial. Typically, is credited to an editorial board, which is a corporate author, and it's also usually considered to be a part of the publishing arm. So, in this case of Minds and Men, then it's marked as an editorial. Wall Street Journal is the publication. It's also the author. Okay, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal was the author of that article. Okay. The one down here is a letter. So all you need to do is identify the letter writer. Okay. Then mark it as a letter, and then the periodical in which that letter appears. If you have an anonymous article, cite the article's title first. Then finish with the citation as you would for any other kind of that kind of periodical. Alright, for articles in scholarly journals. Okay? If you have a print scholarly journal, it's very similar to a regular periodical, except instead of just a date, they're going to give you volume and issue numbers. So as you can see here, Tulsa Studies in Women's Literature, that's the title of the journal. Volume 15, number 1. So you have 15th volume, first issue. The date is 1996. Okay. So typically, if you have a date included for a journal, it's going to be just the year, because the rest of the numerical designation of volume and issue number is going to tell you when in the year that was published. Okay, depending on the publishing schedule of that particular journal. Like for instance, Arizona Quarterly is a quarterly magazine. So volume 50, it's the 50th year they published. Number 3, 1994. So this was published in most likely going to be July of 94. It would be summer. Okay. Then the fall issue, number 4 for that volume would have been published in October of 1994. Okay. If you have an article in a special issue of a scholarly journal, you need to note the title of the journal, but then note that it's a special issue of the scholarly journal if that title is different, and most times it will be. Okay. All right, so that does it for periodicals. Next up is going to be electronic sources. All right, so here is electronic sources. Okay, this is mainly web publications. The 8th edition of the MLA Handbook highlights principles over prescriptive practices. Essentially, a writer will need to take note of primary elements in every source, such as author, title, etc., and then assort them in a general format. Thus, by using this methodology, a writer will be able to cite any source regardless of whether it's included in this list. Okay? So, they talk a bit about managing online sources. Okay? So, one thing they suggest is keeping personal copies of important electronic information whenever possible. So, downloading and printing is what they're basically talking about here, to make sure that you have some kind of copy of the information when you first see it. Okay. Then the second one here is use of URLs. Okay. Include a URL or web address to help readers locate your sources. Because web addresses are not static, MLA suggests the use of citing containers such as YouTube, JSTOR, Spotify, or Netflix in order to easily access and verify sources. However, MLA only requires the www address, so eliminate all the prefixes like the HTTPS and the punctuation when citing URLs. Okay? Again, many scholarly journal articles found in databases include a DOI, which stands for Digital Object Identifier. If a DOI is available, cite the DOI number instead of the URL. Online newspapers and magazines sometimes include a permalink, which is a shortened, stable version of a URL. Look for a share or cite this button to see if a source includes a permalink. If you can find a permalink, use that instead of a URL. Okay? Now, here's the basic style for citations of electronic sources, including online databases. Information that you need to grab. Author or editor names, if applicable, last names first. Article name in quotation marks, title of the website, project, or book in italics. Any version numbers available, including editions, revisions, posting dates, volumes, or issue numbers. Publisher information, including the publisher name and publishing date. Take note of any page numbers or paragraph numbers. DOI if available, otherwise a URL without the HTTPS or permalink. And then the date you access the material. While not required, saving this information is highly recommended, especially when dealing with pages that change frequently or do not have a visible copyright date. Okay. Now, another thing that they don't quite tell you here, many times if you're doing web sources, the website, the publisher are the same. Okay. So don't worry about publisher information if it's a website, because typically, again, the website name and the publisher name are going to be identical. Okay. So if you're citing an entire website, which is not likely, most times you're just going to be citing a single article off a website. Okay. Include a compiler name if no single author is available. Okay. So it would go like this. It'd be kind of like citing a book, except it's an entire website. Okay. If you're citing course or department websites, like if you're at college, give the instructor name, then list the entire title of the course or the school catalog designation for the course in italics. Give appropriate department and school names as well following the course title. Okay. Now what we're going to be most commonly doing it as is a page on a website. Okay. So, usually the title of the page or article appears in the header at the top of the page. Follow this with the information covered above for the entire web sites. If the publisher is the same as the website name, only listed once. Okay? So, as you can see, we have the author here, we have the article title, then we have the website, which is the same as the publisher. So, eHow is in italics, the URL for that particular article, and then the access date. Okay? We have an ebook. Okay? Citations for ebooks closely resemble those for physical books. Simply indicate that the book in question is an ebook by putting the term ebook in the version slot of the MLA template. Okay? So like this. If it is one for a specific reader or device, you need to note which device that is. If it's a Kindle edition, if it's a Nook edition, if it's an Amazon Fire edition. Okay? The MLA considers the term ebook to refer to publications format specifically for reading with an ebook reader device, such as a Kindle or a corresponding web application. These ebooks will not have URLs or DOIs. If you are citing book content from an ordinary web page with a URL, use the A page on a website format above. Okay? If you are citing an image, including a painting, sculpture, or photograph, okay? Provide the artist's name, the work of art italicized, the date of creation, institution, and city where the work is housed. Follow this initial entry with the name of the website in italics and the date of access. Okay? So, as you can see, we have two pieces of art here. Okay? And that's how they've done it. You have the artist, name of the work in italics, date of creation, where it's housed, okay, and the city. Then the website title, the website URL, and then the access date. If the work cited is available on the web only, then provide the name of the artist, title of the work, and then follow the citation format for a website. If the work is posted via a username, use that username for the author. Okay? I should also note if it's a username that's multiple words, treat that username as a corporate author and do not alter the order of the words. Okay? Don't try to do last name, first name on a multiple word username. Alright, an article in a web magazine. Provide the author name, article name in quotation marks, title of the web magazine in italics, publisher name, publication date, URL, and the date of access. Okay? Not much different from a print periodical, except you're not including a page range, you're including a URL and an access date. Article in an online scholarly journal. If it is online only, MLA requires a page range for articles that appear in scholarly journals. If the journal you are citing appears exclusively in online format, i.e. there is no corresponding print publication, that does not make use of page numbers, indicate the URL or other location information. Okay? If it is an online scholarly journal that also appears in print, you're going to have to supply the print page range. Okay? If it's an article from a database, cite online databases and other subscription services as containers. Thus provide the title of the database italicized before the DOI or URL. If a DOI is not provided, use the URL instead. Provide the date of access if you wish. So you can see here, this is what a DOI looks like. Okay? And this is what ProQuest DOIs look like. Okay? We have a way of doing email. Okay? Give the author the message, followed by the subject line quotation marks. State to whom the message was sent with the phrase received by and the recipient's name. Include the date the message was sent. Use standard capitalization. If you're doing a listserv, discussion group, or blog posting, cite web postings as you would standard web entry. Provide the author of the work, the title of the posting, quotation marks, the website name in italics, publisher, and the posting date. Follow with the date of access. Include screen names as author names when author name is not known. If both names are known, place the author's name in brackets. Okay? So as you can see here. Alright. Then we have for Twitter. Begin with the user's Twitter handle in place of the author's name. Next, place the tweet in its entirety in quotations, inserting a period after the tweet within the quotations. Include the date and time of posting and using the reader's time zone. Separate the date and time with a comma and end with a period. Include the date accessed if you deem necessary. Okay? Here's the hard part. This is probably going to change in the next edition of MLA because of the fact that Twitter doubled its character count. Okay? While it's easy to do it with the old 140 character tweets, a 280 character tweet is virtually a paragraph. So there's probably going to be an alteration to this style when the next round of MLA format changes comes around. Just so you know. Okay? And we have a YouTube video. Video and audio sources need to be documented using the same basic guidelines for citing print sources in MLA style. Include as much descriptive information as necessary to help readers understand the type and nature of the source you are citing. If the author's name is the same as the uploader, only cite the author once. If the author is different from the uploader, cite the author's name before the title. Okay? So we have both versions here. Okay? And these YouTube links are the ones that you get when you hit the share button under a video, and it gives you the link that you can copy paste. This is the format of the link. Okay? Then you could also cite a comment on a website or article. List the username as the author. Use the phrase comment on before the title. Use quotation marks around the article title. Name the publisher, date, time listed on near the comment and the URL. Okay? Alright, so that does it for electronic sources. Now we have a catch-all category for everything else we're going to take a look at next. Alright, so now we're looking at other common sources. And as I said before the break, this is actually a catch-all for everything that has been missed by the previous three categories. Okay? Several sources have multiple means for citation, especially those that appear in varied formats. Film, DVDs, television shows, music, published and unpublished interviews, interviews over email, published and unpublished conference proceedings. So this discusses these sorts of citations as well as others not covered in the print, periodical, and electronic sources sections. Okay? But again, they all use the same basic format. So starting with an interview. If it's a personal interview, that's actually one of the simplest Works Cited listings at all. Just list the interview by the name of the interviewee, include the descriptor personal interview, and then the date of it, if it's one that you've done yourself. If it's a published interview, include a title if it has one. Otherwise, just cite it as interview with so-and-so. Give the title of the publication, including all the publication information. All right. If it's an online-only published interview, okay, do it as you would a website. Speeches, lectures, or other oral presentations, including conference presentations. Okay, you want to go with the title of the presentation in quotation marks, followed by the conference where it was presented, the date of it, and the exact location, including the name of the venue and the city. And then use a descriptor that appropriately expresses the type of presentation, such as address, lecture, reading, keynote speech, guest lecture, or conference presentation. In the case of this example, they use keynote address. Okay. And we have panel discussions and question and answer sessions. Okay. There is a difference between the two. Okay. Treat the panel members or speakers as authors by listing them first. If these people are formally listed as panelists, include this by following their names with a comma in the title panelists. Follow with the title of the discussion, or if there is no title, a simple description. In the latter case, don't capitalize the description. Follow this with the title of the conference or event and with the date and location. Okay. Treat recorded discussions as instances of the appropriate medium. Such as, if you want to cite a recording of a panel discussion hosted on YouTube, cite it the same way you would cite an ordinary online video. Okay? Same goes with published conference proceedings. Treat it kind of like an article in a anthology. Okay? Painting, sculpture, or photograph. Okay? If you are observing the artwork in person, provide the artist's name, title of the artwork in italics, and date of composition. Finally, provide the name of the institution that houses the artwork, followed by the location of the institution. If the medium or materials are important to the reference, you can include this information at the end of the entry. However, it's not required. Okay? Now, if you are citing a photo, then you start off with all that stuff that you had before, and then you have to include the container of the photo. Okay, so here's if it's a print version. Here is if it's a website. Okay, we talked about this before in the electronic section. A song or album. Music can be cited multiple ways. Mainly, this depends on the container that you access the music from. Generally, citations begin with the artist's name. They may also be listed by composers or performers. Otherwise, list composer and performer information about the album title after the album title. Put individual song titles in quotation marks. Album names are italicized. Provide the name of the recording manufacturer followed by the publication date. If information such as record label or name of album is unavailable from your source, do not list that information. Okay, so here's some examples here. This is how you would cite a song from Spotify. Okay. This is how you cite a song from an online album. And then here's how you cite a song from physical media, such as a CD. Then we have films or movies. Okay? Here's the tricky part. Okay? Alright, I should mention this. I gotta wait on this until TV. But when you get into filmed media, MLA wants to differentiate between how you were exposed to it. Okay, in the case of TV, it's whether you saw it on first broadcast or whether you saw a recording. Okay, with movies, it's not nearly as pertinent. Okay. List films by their title. Include the name of the director, the film studio or distributor, and the release year. If relevant, list performer names after the director name. Okay? So for movies, it's fairly simple. Just title, the director, film studio, and the release year. In this case, they're very much involved with the performances. in the movie, so they include the actors. To emphasize specific performers or directors, begin the citation with the name of the desired performer or director, followed by the appropriate title for that person. Okay? Now, for television shows, here's how it works. Okay? There's actually 3 formats. First off, if it's recorded. Cite recorded television episodes like films. Begin with the episode name in quotation marks, followed by the series name in italics. When the title of the collection of recordings is different than the original series, such as the show Friends is in DVD release under the title Friends: The Complete Sixth Season, list a title that would help researchers to locate the recording. Give the distributor name followed by the date of distribution. Okay? And we have broadcast TV or radio program. Okay? This is if you're actually watching the broadcast. Not if you have found a recording of it. This is if you're actually experiencing it live. Begin with the title of the episode in quotation marks. Provide the name of the series or program in italics. Also include the network name, call letters of the station, followed by the date of broadcast and city. So you can see here for this episode of The X-Files. Title of the episode is The Blessing Way. The series is The X-Files. Network Fox. Affiliate WXIA. City Atlanta. Date of broadcast 19 July 1998. If you have a show that's presented on Netflix, Hulu, or Google Play, generally when citing a specific episode, follow the format below. Okay? So, in this case, you have the episode title, then you have the series, reference season and episode numbers. You have the original network. You have the date of air. Then here's your container right here. Okay, that's where you got it from. And then they should have a share ability to create a link so that you can go to that specific episode. Okay, this is how it is, at least for Netflix. I have a Hulu account, but I have not figured out how to do it on there yet. Okay, but I'll experiment a little bit with it. They have an entire TV series. When you're citing the entire series of a TV show, use this format. You cite the creators of the show. Okay? And then the title of the show. Then the production partners. Okay? D Productions and Universal Media Studios. That is the production companies. And then the date, the original air date. Okay? The year that the first episode came out is the year. Okay? Alright, if you want to cite a specific performance or aspect of the TV show, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. This is a point where you start pointing out individual performers, okay? And you basically insert those performers into the previous listings, okay? Same if you want to emphasize a particular character throughout the show's runtime. List that performer, okay? When you're citing podcasts, begin with the title of the episode in quotation marks, provide the name of the series in italics, then follow with the MLA format per usual. Okay? So this would include your this title, this is the publisher, date of upload, and then the direct link. If it's from Spotify, you're gonna have to cite Spotify as a container. Okay? Spoken word albums such as comedy albums. This works the same as music albums. Finally, digital files such as PDFs, MP3s, and JPEGs. Determine the type of work to cite, such as an article, an image, or sound recording, and cite appropriately. End the entry with the name of the digital format. If the work does not follow traditional parameters for citation, give the author's name, the name of the work, the date of creation, and the location. Okay? So, you can see how we can do it here. Alright. Alright, so that basically covers everything you need about different formats of citation. Okay, so let's get into the final essay that you guys are doing for the semester. Final major essay, anyway. And that is the proposal essay. Okay? The two previous essays have been about arguing a side of an issue or presenting an opinion on a subject in regards to its quality. Okay? Now, there is a common link to those types of essays, and that is they're mainly reactive types of argument. Situation pre-exists and you're presenting your side of it. So you're trying to argue, I'm on the right side of this, and here's why. Okay? Now, we're going to go into a slightly different type of argument this time with this proposal argument. Okay? The proposal argument is a call to action on the part of the writer toward the audience. Okay? Now, proposals, by their nature, are proactive arguments. They're looking for a particular outcome and arguing why that outcome is a good thing for the audience in question. Okay, so when you're doing persuasion in a proposal argument, you're trying to say, we have this problem here. I have a solution. I want to show you why this is the right solution. I am going to argue for why my solution is the right one. Okay? So that's basically what you're going to be doing with a proposal argument. Let's take a look at what kind of proposals we can do. Okay? So, first off, we have practical proposals. These are proposals that focus on concrete solutions to problems that currently exist. These offer a solution ahead of performing the action, usually by asking for permission to pursue the solution. Okay? So this is the type of thing that you would see in city councils, like planning boards and things like that, where they're asking for permission to proceed with a certain building project or a certain infrastructure improvement, things like that. Okay? Many times these proposals are being used to ask for money. Okay? But they could be proposing the elimination of a factor which causes a problem, or they could be arguing for adding a factor which will mitigate a problem. Okay? Again, proposals asking for funding, such as grants, loans, or other types of largesse, fall into this category as well. Okay? So, I have an example here of this type of proposal. It is a sample from a U.S. Congressional hearing for the 2018 House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing. It's testimony by a fellow named Chris Spear, who is the CEO of ATA, which is a nationwide construction firm. Okay? So, take a listen to what he has to say, because he is actually doing a practical proposal for funding.
While ATA recognizes how difficult it is for members of Congress to commit to or even openly discuss the types of spending needed to address our ailing roads and bridges, as well as the revenue raisers necessary to get there, it is very clear that doing nothing will impose a much higher cost on the American people and on the industry that I represent. Each year, motorists spend more than $1,500 due to the lack of infrastructure investment. That's $500 spent repairing their vehicles and nearly $1,000 more wasted sitting in traffic. The trucking industry loses more than $63.4 billion every year because of congestion. That's 362,000 truck drivers sitting idle for an entire year. And as much as we loved the tax cut we got last year, we're going to give it all back, because that $63 billion is like a 9% tax on our industry. These are the costs of doing nothing. Our solution, the Build America Fund, is the most immediate, efficient, and conservative way to tackle this problem. We're proposing a 20-cent fee on fuel at the wholesale terminal rack, 5 cents per year for 4 years. Unlike tolls or mileage fees, it's extremely inexpensive to collect. More than 99 cents on every dollar will be spent on transportation programs and projects, not paying for new bureaucracies or lining the pockets of foreign banks. It doesn't grow the budget deficit. It shores up the Highway Trust Fund, and it puts real money on the table, $340 billion in new additional revenue over the first 10 years.
All right, so you heard what he was proposing was actually an increase to a fuel tax. Okay, so and he was proposing that we use that money to fund infrastructure improvement projects. Okay. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here with practical proposals, is we're giving a solution that will provide improvement to the circumstances. Okay? The other type, of which you're probably more familiar with, is a policy proposal, which focuses on swaying public support toward a public policy. Okay? Now, primarily these are found in the halls of politics, and many times they're pursued in the news media as politicians curry favor for their pet legislation. Okay, these are all like the grand sweeping sort of things. Okay, things like climate control legislation, gun control legislation, things like immigration reform. Okay, those are policy proposals, and those are wider categories of policy proposals. And there's going to be little nuances and niches to how people want to achieve those policy goals. Okay. Now, one thing that's included in this is political advertising. Okay. So I want to give you a couple examples of this from a very famous and very contentious election. Okay. It's very well known in history. So these are from the 1964 presidential campaign. Okay. If you're familiar with history, you'll know the two candidates that ran in the general election. One of them was the incumbent president, Lyndon Johnson. He took office after JFK was assassinated. He's a Democrat from Texas. There's a lot of stuff in Dallas that's named after him, including a freeway. Okay. His opponent in that 1964 campaign was Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. He's a senior senator from Arizona. He was very much very conservative, very much anti-communist, very much let's get back to how we were in the 50s. Okay? And he's a little on the crazy side, especially when it comes to his anti-communist rhetoric, tended to border on saber-rattling warmongering, okay? To the point where it basically dominated the campaign. As you're going to see, we have two different approaches to this. Goldwater is going to try to appeal to domestic issues and say, this is what I want to do for the average Joe six-pack, okay? Johnson, on the other hand, is going to say, hey, here's my proposal. Elect me, and we'll stay alive. Okay? You'll see what I mean when we get to these ads. Well, let's take a look at the Goldwire ad first. Alright, so here's the Goldwire ad, and you're actually going to hear how kind of even semi-old-fashioned this is. Incidentally, I should note that Goldwater is a heavily influential figure in the conservative movement, so much so that there are still some ideas of his that the Republican Party still espouses. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
Don't look now, young man, but somebody has his hand in your pocket. It's the hand of big government. It's taking away about 4 months' pay from what your daddy earns every year. $1 out of every 3 in his paycheck. And it's taking the security out of your grandmother's Social Security.
You know, that's the great trouble with big inflationary government. It takes more and more of your earnings. It slowly but surely destroys individual initiative and responsibility. Government must draw its strength from the people. And as it drains away this strength, it must inevitably undermine the foundations of self-government. I ask you to join me in helping restore the individual freedoms and initiatives this nation once knew, to make government more the servant and not the master of us all. In this free nation, we do not choose to be ruled. We elect to be governed.
In your heart, you know he's right. Vote for Barry Goldwater.
I'm sorry, but that ad always strikes me as having an extremely arrogant tagline to it. It's like, in your heart, you know he's right. Don't tell me what I know, okay? Alright, so contrast that to this Lyndon Johnson ad. Now let me make note here. This Johnson ad, you may have had exposure to it before. You may have seen parts of it. May not have seen the whole thing, because usually people stop about midway, okay? This ad only aired once, Okay? And after I show you this ad, I'll tell you how that, you probably know already, but I'll tell you how that election came out. Alright, so here is the Lyndon B Johnson ad. Again, this ad only aired once, and that's all that Johnson needed.
The stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
So it might not surprise you to hear that not only did Johnson win that election, he actually won it in a landslide. Okay, led to a lot of retooling of the Republican message, which they took advantage of turmoil in the Democratic Party in 1968 to get Nixon elected. I will say that Johnson's policy proposals were not ones that he followed through on, because he was looking for peaceful terms. But instead, during his term, he wound up escalating the Vietnam War, which became highly unpopular back home, even within his own party. He tried to get support on his side, but ultimately failed. Okay, he did a lot of good things. For instance, the Civil Rights Acts were all signed by Johnson. Okay, he had an idea for the Great Society. He had a lot of policy proposals that he presented during his time as president, but the problem being the big elephant in the room was Vietnam. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what policy proposals look like when they're presented by political candidates as advertising. Okay. Now, when we're talking about coming up with a topic for a proposal, there's some questions you should probably be asking yourself. Okay, there's 11 in particular that Yagelski presents for you. First one: why is the problem a problem? Okay, a proposal's not going to work too well if you can't emphasize the reason why whatever it is that you're solving needs a solution. Okay, so ask why the problem is a problem. For whom is it a problem? That's actually going to dictate who your audience is. Okay, partially. It's also going to determine who you're speaking on behalf of. Okay. Third, how will these people suffer if the problem is not solved? Okay. Think of some examples of how it's going to affect that larger community if the problem does not find a resolution. Okay. Number 4, who has the power to solve the problem? Who can make the decision, or who can provide whatever resources are necessary to implement a solution? Number 5, why hasn't the problem been solved by now? What is taking so long in getting this problem addressed? Okay. Number 6, how can the problem be solved? So create a solution. Okay, come up with some way that you can solve the problem and satisfy all sides. Okay? What are the probable benefits of acting on your solution? How is it going to help? Specifically, the people that you are representing, the people who are suffering from the problem. But also, how is it going to benefit those who may not necessarily be suffering from the problem? Okay? What costs are associated with it? How much is it going to cost in terms of money, in terms of manpower, material, whatever? Number 9, who will bear those costs? Who are you expecting to pay for it? Number 10, why should the solution be put into place? Okay, give us a moral reason. That's mainly what we're looking at here, is the moral reason for your solution to be put into action. And then number 11, what makes this solution better than the alternatives? Okay, come up with some kind of hypothetical here where you're thinking, okay, here's what happens if my solution is implemented. Here's what happens if this solution that's been proposed is implemented. Mine is the superior solution because it helps more people, or it does more to solve the problem, or it actually addresses the problem instead of dancing around it. Okay, whatever reason you have where your solution is better than the alternatives. Okay? Now, when we're writing a proposal, your proposal needs to offer a solution to the problem. Okay? Keep in mind that there are alternatives to every problem, including doing nothing. Okay? Doing nothing is always going to be an option that people will embrace. Okay? Just keep in mind that what you are actually proposing is, we're not going to do nothing. We're going to take some action. Okay? As I've included this quote here, I love this quote because it directly addresses this. Okay, this quote is from the first Wonder Woman movie. It's Steve Trevor saying, "My father told me once, he said, if you see something wrong happening in the world, you can either do nothing or you can do something. And I already tried nothing." Okay? So, it's a good quote. All right? It applies to this particular situation immensely. Okay, when you're writing a proposal, you are proposing doing something. You must convince your audience this action must be taken, and that your proposed action is the right action for the current situation. That is the whole goal of your proposal. Okay, so typically it's broken into 3 parts in a proposal essay. First off, describe the problem. Okay, so first, demonstrate that there is a significant problem in existence. Okay? Here's what it accomplishes mainly is to make it real for the audience and make them feel that it is not right. Okay? Immerse them in it. Make them feel what's going on. Okay? Who is affected by the problem? Okay? What's happening on the ground? Who is in the middle of it? Who is directly affected? What caused the problem? Okay? Why hasn't it been solved already? Okay? Whether it's basically serendipity or negligence. Okay? What's the reason that this problem hasn't been solved yet? And what negative consequences are there for allowing the problem to continue to exist? Okay? And I thought as a good example of this, I would show a recent problem that needed creative proposals for solutions, and that was the Flint water crisis, which theoretically, technically is still ongoing. Okay, so you may know the basics of this. I'm actually going to give you start by giving you a timeline of it so that you know exactly what the problem is. Okay, so we're going to describe the problem here with this first article. Let me show it to you. All right, so our first article comes from U.S. News and World Report. This is a timeline of the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Okay, this is from 2017. Okay, the initial crisis started in 2014. All right, so here we go. This is compiled from the Associated Press. It's been more than 3 years since Flint, Michigan switched its water source in an effort to save money, which led to a man-made public health crisis embroiling Michigan Governor Rick Snyder's administration in scrutiny and criminal charges against a number of public officials. The most serious counts have been levied against Michigan's top health official and 4 others, who were charged Wednesday with involuntary manslaughter. Here are some key events surrounding the impoverished city's lead-tainted water crisis. Okay, now one thing to remember to keep in mind when we talk about Flint, Flint is a city that has approximately a 85 to 90% African American population. Okay, so it is basically a minority hub. All right. April 2014. In an effort to save money, Flint begins drawing water from the Flint River for its 100,000 residents, instead of relying on water from Detroit. The move is considered temporary while the city waits to connect to a new regional water system. Residents immediately complained about the smell, taste, and appearance of the water and raised health concerns, reporting rashes, hair loss, and other problems. January 2015. Detroit offers to reconnect Flint to its water system, but Flint leaders insist the water is safe. September 24, 2015. A group of doctors urges Flint to stop using the Flint River for water after finding high levels of lead in the blood of children. State regulators insist the water is safe. September 29, 2015. Governor Rick Snyder pledges to take action in response to the lead levels, the first acknowledgement by the state that lead is a problem. October 2015. Snyder announces that the state will spend $1 million to buy water filters and test water in Flint public schools, and days later calls for Flint to go back to using water from Detroit's system. October 15, 2015, the Michigan legislature and Snyder approved nearly $9.4 million in aid to Flint, including $6 million to help switch its drinking water back to Detroit. December 29, 2015, Snyder accepts the resignation of Department of Environmental Quality Director Dan Wyant and apologizes for what occurred in Flint. January 5th, 2016, Snyder declares a state of emergency in Flint the same day federal officials confirm that they are investigating. A week later, the Michigan National Guard begins helping to distribute bottled water and filters while Snyder asks the federal government for help. January 13th, 2016, Michigan health officials report an increase in Legionnaire's disease cases, some fatal, over the past 2 years in the county that includes Flint. January 14th, 2016, Snyder asks the Obama administration for major disaster declaration and more federal aid. The White House provides federal aid and emergency declaration on January 16th, but not the disaster declaration. January 15th, 2016, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette begins an independent review into the Flint crisis. Mid-March 2016, state officials testified before Congress, including Snyder and the state-appointed emergency manager who oversaw Flint when the water source was switched to the river. March 23, 2016, a governor-appointed panel concludes that the state of Michigan is fundamentally accountable for the crisis because of decisions made by environmental regulators. April 20th, 2016, 2 state officials and a local official are charged with evidence tampering and other crimes in the Michigan Attorney General's investigation, the first to be levied in the probe. August 14th, 2016, a federal emergency declaration over Flint's lead-tainted water crisis ends, but state officials say work continues to fix the drinking water system and provide services to city residents. December 2nd, researchers report that water in Flint is improving after finding no detectable levels of lead in 57% of homes during another round of tests, but they caution residents to continue using filters. December 10th, 2016, Congress approves a wide-ranging bill to authorize water projects across the country, including $170 million to address lead in Flint's drinking water. December 16th, 2016, Congressional Republicans quietly closed a year-long investigation into Flint's crisis, faulting both state officials and the Environmental Protection Agency. December 20th, 2016, Schuette charges former emergency managers Darnell Early and Gerald Ambrose with multiple 20-year felonies for their failure to protect the residents of Flint from health hazards caused by contaminated drinking water. He also charges Early, Ambrose, and 2 Flint City employees with felony counts of false pretenses and conspiracy to commit false pretenses in the issuance of bonds to pay for a portion of the water project that led to the crisis. February 17, 2017, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission issues a report that finds systemic racism going back decades is at the core of problems that caused the water crisis in the majority black city of Flint. March 16, 2017, Snyder announces that his administration will enact the country's toughest lead limit for water in the wake of the lead contamination in Flint. March 28, 2017. Water lines at 18,000 homes in Flint will be replaced under a landmark deal approved by a judge, marking a milestone in the effort to overcome the disastrous decision in 2014 to draw water from the Flint River without treating it to prevent lead contamination. June 14, 2017. Michigan Health and Human Services Director Nick Lyon is accused of failing to alert the public about an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in the Flint area. He and 4 others are charged with involuntary manslaughter. The state's chief medical officer, Dr. Eden Wells, is charged with obstruction of justice and lying to an investigator. Schuette says he is not charging Snyder. Again, this is from 2017. I should note that in 2018, there was an election. Snyder did not run for re-election because he was term limited. The new governor I always want to call her Gretchen Wilson because her first name is Gretchen, but I can't remember her last name. She also has a new attorney general. Last I had heard, late last year, they said that they actually were going to charge Snyder over the Flint crisis. All right, so you see how it goes with describing the problem. Now, the second part of your proposal should be a proposal for a solution. Okay? Describe your solution with enough detail to show how it would work and what it would cost. Okay? So, here's the hard part. Ideally, you should have a solution in mind by this point. Okay? There should be something that you have thought of that would create a mitigation of the problem. Okay? How would you solve this problem? Oh, this is going to do it. Okay, great. How are we going to put that into practice? Okay, this is how we're going to do it. That's ideal for what you want to do for a solution. Okay? If you do not have a viable solution, what you may opt for is a planning proposal, where in this case a solution is convening a committee to propose solutions at a later time. Okay? I don't particularly care for this type of proposal because it's basically the equivalent of kicking the can down the road. I don't want you guys to write this type of proposal. Okay? This is not a proposal. This is passing the buck. Okay, so you're not going to be having anybody writing a planning proposal. You want to have a solution that can be implemented. Okay, so let's take a look at another example. An example of a proposal for a solution. This is a list of possible solutions to the Flint water crisis that was created by a high school class in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Okay. Possible solutions to the Flint water crisis. What has already been done? The largest effort so far has been sending in truckloads of water bottles. Okay? Although it's a good thought, using water bottles is not environmentally or politically sustainable. The average person in the U.S. uses 101.5 gallons of water per day. That is equal to 812 standard-sized water bottles per day and completely ridiculous. Okay? Now, keep in mind that 101.5 gallons figure is not what the average person is drinking. That is what the average person is using. Okay? And this includes for bathing, for cooking, for flushing toilets, for watering lawns, whatever they're using water for. Okay? Permanent solutions. We can replace the lead pipes and switch them to plastic pipes to get clear water, along with switching back to the city of Detroit's water supply. The authorities should investigate the problem thoroughly so we can make sure the situation won't happen again. Experts expect it will cost at least $1.5 billion to replace all of the pipes. This is the most complete solution and also the most expensive. Although it would be expensive, we shouldn't worry about the cost if it can save human lives. Digging up all the pipes and replacing them is really the only option, other than moving everyone out of Flint, which would be even more expensive and potentially ruin the lives of many. The main barrier is the cost. If we can secure funding from the government and public donors that want to help, we can end the excessive amounts of lead in Flint's water. Our solution is permanent. Sending water by the truckload is just temporary. For the moment, Flint should hold classes for all citizens explaining the dangers of drinking lead-polluted water. Many residents are still drinking some of the water, not knowing what long-term damage it can cause. Many citizens have suffered from memory loss or brain damage, and I think Flint needs to reduce that. Okay, so just from a practical viewpoint as an amateur plumber myself, plastic pipes sounds like a good solution. It's especially good. It would be a good solution if we were talking about Oklahoma. However, we're talking about Michigan, which gets hard freezes. Plastic does not tend to survive a hard freeze very well. They'd have to use some kind of metallic piping. Typically, they have non-ferrous pipes that are metal pipes that are used in modern construction that they're probably going to be using to replace those old pipes, because the old pipes were iron and lead. Okay, so. But I like the other solutions that they're bringing up here. Get people to pay for it. Okay, secure funding from the government and public donors. Continue to use filters. Okay, replace the pipes. Obviously. Okay. It's obviously we need something more permanent than just relying on the goodwill of everyone around us to send us immense immense supplies of Dasani water. All right. So the third segment of a proposal is the justification. Okay. So first you present your problem. Second, you present your solution. Now the third part is you need to justify that solution. Why is it the right solution? Okay. So you need to persuade the audience that there is justification in reaching your solution to the problem. So why is your solution the best? Okay. One thing you can do here is point out the drawbacks to alternative solutions in your argument. Okay. This is where you can refute other possible solutions. Try to say, hey, it might seem like a good idea, but here are some drawbacks where it's not going to help as many people as we need it to. Okay. There's certain things that are going to be more cost effective. Certain things are going to be more permanent. Okay. Once you've come up with the whys for your solution being the best option, you need to choose strategies to justify that solution. So, a few different approaches you can take. One is an argument from principle. Your solution should be enacted because it's the right thing to do according to your audience's value or belief system, one which you share. Okay? So, we need to do this because, dang it, it's the right thing to do. We're gonna send ourselves to hell if we don't. It's basically what this comes down to. Okay? Argument from principle is, morally, this is the right thing to do. Then you have argument from consequence. Your solution should be enacted because the consequences will be positive for the audience. It can also be used to justify not taking action as potential consequences could be negative. Okay? So, what you're arguing is the end result is going to be, in the long run, more positive for everyone involved. Not just the people you're arguing for, but also the audience that you are speaking to. Okay? That's a good approach to take. Another really good approach to take is an argument from precedent or analogy. Your solution should be enacted because similar solutions have been enacted previously with positive outcomes. Now, in a related way, you could use an analogy to show how your solution will benefit the audience. Okay? Come up with some creative way of expressing how a similar circumstance with a similar solution helps others. Okay? Helps everyone, not just the people that are directly benefited by it. Okay? So as an example of this precedent or analogy, here's an article that gives a proposal. Here's how to fix Flint's water system. Privatize it. Okay? Might sound weird, but give him a minute here. We're going to take a look at this article, and you'll see how he's arguing this. Alright, so here we go. Here's how to fix Flint's water system. Privatize it. A privately run water system is more accountable to the people. Okay? Now, it sounds weird. It sounds like some kind of conservative pyramid scheme at first thought. Okay? But stick with it. Let's take a look at what he has to say. Social media sites are awash in pictures of Flint's awful water. Local children exposed to lead will likely face long-term health consequences. It appears that kids suffer from high lead levels in many Michigan cities. Amidst revelations that the state of Michigan made sure its Flint employees had clean water long before taking action on the rapidly declining tap water, maybe shame will at last lead state and local officials to look into how to fix the water utility. And maybe other localities can start thinking about how to best prevent the next mass water poisoning. It isn't rocket science. There are more than 50,000 water utilities in the United States, and more than 50,000 of them are providing safe drinking water. When things go wrong, as they did in Flint, bad political and management decisions are to blame. On the political side, it is clear that the state and local officials papered over the crisis as long as they could, apparently hoping for some miracle to save them from facing the music. Paul Krugman blames stingy Republicans trying to save money, part of the left-wing narrative that presumes more spending would have prevented the crisis. But as Reason's Sheikha Dalmia has reported, Flint's water decisions were driven by dreams of economic stimulus. Officials knowingly chose a more expensive approach widely predicted to experience delays. These delays left the city with nothing but nasty water. Meanwhile, the utility managers who were supposed to ensure the water coming out of taps was safe, and the state regulators who oversaw them botched the job. Improper testing protocols and practices on top of bad political decisions made it hard for consumers to discern the emerging problem and allowed the utility to provide toxic water to people's homes for months. It is very unlikely any of this could have happened if Flint's water utility had been private. Maybe with Walmart, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and other companies overcoming their greed to donate massive amounts of bottled water to Flint residents, suspicion of privatizing water utilities will lessen. Nearly 75 million people in the U.S. get their water from a private utility, almost a quarter of the population. Most probably don't even know it. And about 1,000 cities in the country have hired a private company to operate their publicly owned water utility. This is a long-running practice. Back in the 1990s, President Bill Clinton's Environmental Protection Agency said that privatizing water utilities can be used by communities to provide needed environmental services more efficiently, and can be used as a way to provide substantial benefits to both the public and private sectors, creating the classic win-win situation. Indeed, a number of communities privatized their water utilities in order to get them into compliance with EPA's safe drinking water standards. Under government operation, they would have never gotten there. Flint residents could learn from the example set by Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 1993, Milwaukee's water supply suffered an outbreak of cryptosporidium and had to invent Ebooks and new filtration. Since the most likely culprit was their own sewage going into Lake Michigan, they privatized their wastewater utility and required the private company to clean the water even more thoroughly than the EPA requires. Over 20 years later, privatization is still going strong for Milwaukee. This illustrates a key difference between public and private water utilities: oversight. If Flint's water utility had been private, it would not have been allowed by state regulators to provide toxic water to citizens. Workers would have been forced to make the investments to fix the problem in the most cost-effective manner. But it probably would not even have come to that. Private utilities simply borrow the money to build new water supply pipelines or treatment plants when they need them, and they have every incentive to build them fast and keep costs down. In contrast, for a municipal utility, it is a long and painful political process, fighting against other agencies and political priorities to get approval to borrow money to build new facilities. And that process can be hijacked by all manner of politics, just as stimulus fever hijacked the Flint project. Private utilities are also much more accountable to the customers. Citizens of Flint cannot sue the government agencies that provide them toxic water. Thanks a lot, sovereign immunity. But private utilities enjoy no such immunity, which means that avoiding liability from providing bad water is a high priority. It's true that privatization of water utilities has pros and cons, but consider that every year, about 100 communities that have privatized their water system have the contract come up for renewal or cancellation, and every year more than 90% of those communities decide to stick with privatization. These folks are obviously much happier with their private water utility right now than Flint citizens are with their government-run one. Alright, so the main thing I want to get at here is he's using a real-world example to show how this solution is implemented and how it actually works to mitigate a problem with polluted water, in this case the Milwaukee situation. Okay? He's really focused on this is how we can solve this problem, and he's not arguing it from a sense, doesn't seem like he's arguing from a sense of jingoism. He's actually arguing it from a sense of this is what has worked in the past, this is what makes sense. Okay? So, keep that in mind. You can justify things by showing examples of how your solution has worked for similar problems in the past. Okay? Alright, so let's talk briefly about multimodal proposals, because this will actually play into the proposal assignment. Okay? Some proposals use multimodal methods to invoke emotional or logical responses in the audience. Okay? What this leads to is a more receptive audience for the proposed solution within the proposal. Okay? This is going to be places where proposals are using visual aids, or they're using testimonials, they are using all sorts of different media methods in order to get their point across, in order to show that we're the trustworthy ones, we have the right solution, we're on the right side of things. Okay? So multimodal proposals are basically going to be ones that have the proposal essay element, but at the same time they'll also have an additional element that helps to illustrate that. It doesn't completely supplant the written proposal, it actually enhances it by giving the audience a reason to understand why this is a problem, okay, and why your solution is going to be the best one. It kind of plays on the appeal to emotion, okay. So as an example here, I wanted to you to take a look at this graphic here. Okay, it was designed for a social media campaign to legalize marijuana. Okay, this is an appeal to logos because it's primarily text, but it shows a photo of the speaker that this quote is attributed to. Okay, all right. So this is a quote from a fellow named John Ehrlichman, who was a counsel and assistant to U.S. President Richard M. Nixon. He was interviewed in 1992, so this is 22 years after Nixon resigned from office. Okay, the full quote is in an article titled "Truth, Lies, and Audio Tape" by Dan Baum, who's a journalist, and he also authored a book titled "Smoke and Mirrors: The War on Drugs and the Politics of Failure." Okay, so. And this is basically attached to an argument by this group for the social media campaign that marijuana should not have been criminalized in the first place, because the criminalization of marijuana was indeed a racial and a political thing. Okay, it wasn't about a health crisis; it was about politics. Okay, so. The question is, why the war on drug users? And here is Ehrlichman's quote. You want to know what this was really all about? Nixon had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Just let that sink in there, okay? All the stuff that we were taught as kids about drug avoidance and stuff like that, just say no. The entire war on drugs was predicated on let's try to disrupt the civil rights and anti-war movements. Okay? Kind of makes you question your existence sometimes, I gotta say. So, this is a good example, though, of a multimodal proposal, because I look at that graphic, I am looking at that quote, I am looking at that man and thinking, that guy looks slimy enough to have actually said that. Okay? And it affects me in a way that I'm more willing to be open to whatever proposal that multimodal graphic is attached to. In this case, the graphic is attached to an argument for legalizing pot. Okay? So, that's how multimodal proposals work. Okay, that's how multimodal presentations work. They affect people on multiple levels so that they are more receptive to what you have to say. All right. With that being said, let's talk about the proposal essay assignment. Okay, here's the nitty-gritty of it. It's coming up on the end of the semester. We're running at the very tail end of this, okay? We're going to try to streamline this a bit. So, your assignment is going to be to write a proposal argument based on your annotated bibliography. Disregard what this slide has to say about current Brookhaven problems. That winds up not working. I am going to have you guys writing it based on the research question you came up with for your annotated bibliography, okay? That was going to save you a whole heck of a lot of time because you already have your research sources right there. Okay, you can go through those. Use that for the research for this essay. Now, what you need to include in this essay, first off, describe your problem in detail, especially why the audience should care about it. Okay, make the audience understand what they need to know about this topic, what they need to know about the problem, why the problem is a problem. Okay. Second, offer a solution, including all the conditions it will take to enact that solution. What's it going to take? How much investment does it need? How much money does it need? How much manpower? How much resources? How many materials? What needs to happen in order to get your solution implemented? Third, justify your solution. Make the audience believe yours is the right one to follow. So present your solution as the best alternative. Okay? As opposed to other solutions that may have been already proposed for the circumstances. There is a bonus opportunity for this essay as well. Okay? You can create a multimodal work that summarizes your proposal and turn it in along with your proposal essay for 10 extra points. Okay? Now, multimodal work can be anything which uses visual or audio media. Okay? This can include flyers, infographics, video, podcasts, whatever you can think of. Whatever you can think of that will enhance your argument. Okay? And in terms of infographics, it's kind of like that one I showed on the previous slide, the Ehrlichman quote. Something that's going to appeal visually to the reader and make them think about your proposal. Okay? Same with any flyers or PowerPoints or whatever you create for it. Whatever kind of multimodal argument you want to make, any kind of multimodal presentation you want to make. Okay? So the base requirements for this essay, it should be 3 to 5 pages, double spaced. It should be 11 to 12 point font, Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, or the acceptable fonts as usual. The works cited and citations should be in proper MLA format. You're going to be doing some research for this argument. It's going to be based on whatever sources you have collected you and your team have collected rather for the annotated bibliography. Okay? The essay should be well workshopped by the final draft. Okay? So teams are going to have to try to stick together here in this. All right? Not above and beyond doing the annotated bib, you're going to have to stick together to do workshopping. Okay? The following should be turned in with your files in this order. Okay? So you should have one Word file that includes, in this order, the final draft, including the works cited, the proofreading and editing draft, then the revision draft. And then if you're going to turn in a multimodal work, you can turn that in as a separate file. For this part only, I will also accept JPEGs and Photoshop format files or hyperlinks if turning in videos or podcasts. Okay? Now, the dates you need to remember for this assignment. The revision workshop is going to be the week of April 26th. Okay? So that is the second to last week of class. Okay? The proofreading and editing workshop is the week of May 3rd. That's the final week of regular classes. The link to turn in this proposal opens up on May 6th. The final due date is May 7th at midnight. Okay? That's also the last day to turn in everything in the class because the discussion board and bind tap will both lock at that time. Okay? So, make sure that you've got all your business together and squared away by that time. Okay? Alright, so that'll do it for this week. Just as your to-do list here, I need you guys to continue working on the annotated bibliographies. They will be due next week. I want you guys to continue working with discussion boards and MindTap. There will be new discussion topics. There is the lecture exercise this week in trying to do citations. Okay? And I want you guys to start thinking about how you're going to approach your proposals. What kind of solutions do you want to propose for the problem presented in the research question for your annotated bibliographies? Okay? So, all that said and done, there'll be another Collaborate session this week. I will see you guys then. Another lecture next week. And that's it for me. Thanks for watching.